I've been in the learning industry for about 8 years now, and I think I'm going to skip the part where really the background, so to speak, and just rush through it so that I can get to the good stuff, at least the one that you care about. So I started my career as a software developer, or rather on the solution side of things, and I was a project manager. I worked with a lot of big companies in the US and in India. And really my journey began when I came back to India about 8 years ago. And when I came back, and when I say I came back, I'm actually an Indian by birth, and I grew up in the US, so the funny accent. And somebody the other day asked me, they said, is it because you lived in the US for 10 years that you look white, or does it have to do with something else? So it's actually my ancestors are from Egypt, and so that's kind of the lineage. But over the last 8 years, it's been a real transformational journey for me, at least. And when I came to India, I realized that there's an aspect of human development as well, which is equally important. So I was attending a training organized by the company I was working with at that time, and they sent me for a training, and I was glad to be there. Coming out of the training, it was kind of like one of those business communication trainings, and coming out of the training, the trainer asked me if I would be interested in the training industry, and at that time I had never even considered it, and that was something that really appealed to me at a personal level. So I showed some interest, and then I left my job, and I became a facilitator and a trainer. After which I started training and doing various types of exercises, various types of learning, activity-based learning, and things like that. And it was about that time when I started realizing that I could actually merge the two aspects, merge technology with the human side of things. So one was, using training to do various types of learning engagements, exactly like the kind of stuff that Greg was talking about just now. Really, really powerful stuff. And the other is how we can use technology to enable that kind of a learning. So what I want to do right now is I want to give you an example of one of the games that we used to play way back when there was no technology, and we kind of just did it by standing up and using various types of mechanics. So what I need 10 volunteers in the room, and let's see who some of the brave souls are, because we've got some gifts and things like that as well. So hopefully that's enough of a motivation. So I'm going to take 2 or 3 people from each of the segments of the room. So let me see some hands up of the people who want to volunteer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gentlemen here. Come on over. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Come on over. All right. So the rest of you can kind of watch, and it would be better for you to stand and watch, because it's kind of an interactive thing that we're going to do over here. So let's gather around here. I think this is a good place to, and this will give you guys a little bit of perspective on the kind of stuff that we used to do. The rest of what I'm going to be sharing, and I'm not going to take a lot of time, with this. I'm going to take a little bit of time with this, but more importantly, I want to leave some time to have conversations around this stuff. So do we have 10 people up here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Come on in, just join in. What the heck? Come on in. Let's make a circle. Let's make a circle. All right, make a circle. All right, so for the rest of you, you'll get a better view of this if you stand up and maybe even come closer. So you get an idea of what's going on over here, okay? All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to play a game called You. What's it called? You. That's right, it's called You. All right, circle slightly bigger. All right, good stuff. Man, these guys are pros. So here's what we're going to do, okay? You look at another person, anybody else in here, you look them in the eye, and you say, you. All right? And here's how it works. So it's going to be a pattern. So I'm going to start by saying, looking at anybody in the room. So first and foremost, we raise our hands up in the air. Then I look at any person in the room, and I'll say, you. All right? At this point, my hand goes down, all right? And then you will look at any person in the room, and you will say, you. It's kind of like passing the you, all right? So I give you to you, you give you to whoever else you want in this room, and then your hand comes down. The moment everybody's hands are down, the last person who's got you will give it back to me. Okay? And then I will give you back to the same person that I gave to, and that person will give you to the next same person that you gave to. Okay? So you have to remember the pattern. And there are only two things you have to remember. Very easy game. There's only two things you have to remember. One is who you gave you to, and second, who gave you to you. All right, you got it. So let's do this, all right? You. Hands up, everybody. Hands up, everybody. All right. You.
You. You. You. You. You. You. You. You. Oh. You. You.
Did you receive you? You gave it to, but you gave it to, who'd you give it to? But he's not looking at you. Yeah, okay. And you gave it to? You gave it to who? Really? Really? You gave it to this guy, right? All right. And you're the last person? You're going to give it back to me. Oh, you gave him a you. So why is your hand still up? All right. So let's do this again. All right. You can give it to the same person if you want. If you don't, it's all right. It takes a little bit of practice, and then you'll get it. It's not that difficult, but you'll catch on. All right. This time, same person if you want to. But when you receive you, your hand comes down. Or the moment you give you, that's when your hand comes down. Don't leave your hand up. All right. You. You. Okay, so I got it, and now the full circle is complete, right? Let's do it again. Same. Now this, you got to give it to the same person that you gave to last time. Stay with me. It's going to get good, I'm telling you. So you got to give it to the same person that you gave to last time, all right? We got to do a couple of rounds of this to get good at it. You. Hey, what was that? So you're looking at me, but you're giving you to him. You. 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 All right, give them a round of applause. They're pretty good. All right, now let me break it to you. That ain't nothing. We about to turn up the heat in here, all right? Here's what we're going to do now. Keep that, okay? What you just did, you remember that, right? Who you gave you to and who gave you to you? You remember that, right? Control S, save that, all right? We're going to start a new layer, a new one now, all right? And this one, hands up everybody, this one is your favorite breakfast item, all right? Your favorite breakfast item. Now this time, here's the kicker. You can't give it to the same person that you gave to last time. You got to give it to a new person. All right, let's see how good you guys are. Ready? You ready?
You give the breakfast.
Yeah, you give the breakfast. Instead of saying you now give the breakfast. So my favorite breakfast item is jam pao. So I'm going to give jam pao to somebody, and then no repeats. So you cannot repeat it. If somebody said dosa and you want to say dosa, then you can't say dosa no more. All right? Here we go. Jam pao.
Dosa. Idli. Bread of chocolates. Cornflakes. Samosa. Roti. Bacon. Sausages. Okay. Upma. Sandwich.
Okay. Jam pao. Same person as the previous one. Same as the previous one.
Same.
Yes.
Sausages. Upma. Sandwich.
Did everybody get to give a breakfast item? Did you get to give as well? Yeah, okay. Jampao. Same person, okay? Jampao.
Roti, bacon, sausages, upma, sandwich.
Jampao.
Idli, bread omelette, chapos, samosa, roti, bacon, sausages, upma, sandwich.
You.
You get it. You. You.
Ah, okay. So it wasn't. Ah, right. So what's happening here? Interestingly, this is really good. So what's happening here is, gentleman here is trying to give you to the person he gave breakfast to, right? And so he recognized this and he said, "Hey, it wasn't me. It was somebody else." Right? So who did you give you to? All right. Let's keep it going.
You.
Who did you receive? Who received you from him?
Me.
Ah, no.
Yeah. But dosa was.
Dosa came from there.
Yeah.
And where did you go?
Actually, you came for me. He gave the you for me.
You.
In the first round, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Keep it going.
You.
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 You. Oh.
Hey, what happened there?
Just skipped it.
What happened there?
Gave him by mistake actually.
So he bypassed that and cut it forward. Okay. All right. One more. You. Happening here is about managing priorities alongside of the things that are your major objectives or the tasks that you really need to get done. It's also about communication. So many a times people are passing you to people who they don't not supposed to receive you from, but they give it to them and they gladly take it. Right? So it's also about assertiveness and stepping down and saying, God, you weren't supposed to give it to me, you were supposed to give it to so and so. So it's not just a memory game, it's also about ensuring that you're managing your priorities. Let's do you and breakfast one more time. If you guys do this right, we're going to move to the next level. You guys want to do that? Yeah, move to the next level. You know, gaming is all about levels. You gotta, if you tell the gamer that you're going to move to the next level, it's on. Right? Let's do it. You. Who received you from him?
He's received you from me.
Then why are you giving it to him?
No, because he's supposed to like I'm supposed to give him the you. You're not supposed to give it to him.
You? Who are
You. Yeah. Yes. I got
Who?
it. No, I used to give it to him. I'm supposed to give it to you. Okay. Okay, fine. Let's do it.
breakfast. Jampao.
Idli. Bread omelette. Chapos. Samosa. Roti. Bacon. Sausages. Upma.
Sandwich.
Jampao. See, breakfast they remember. Jampao.
Idli. Bread omelette. Chapos. Samosa. Roti. Bacon. Sausages. Upma.
Sandwich.
Jampao.
Idli. Bread omelette. Chapos. Samosa. Roti. Bacon. Sausages. Upma.
Sandwich.
All right, since you is messed up, we're going to leave that. We're going to come to a new one. New hands up, everybody. We're going to do sounds this time, okay? A sound and a gesture, but new person. Remember it. For it to get good, you got to remember it, okay? Two things, that's all you got to remember. Who gave you to you and who you gave you to. And in this case, you is the sound and the gesture, okay? Ready?
Wow.
Hey, I'm not choo-choo. My hand is down. How are you giving me choo-choo? Is that for me? All right.
Wow. Forgot the song.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Let us just.
You knew it. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
All right, since you guys remember this, now what we're going to do is we're going to merge the two. It's like Adobe Photoshop, you know, when you merge the two layers, now both of them are going to happen simultaneously. So while I've got Jampao going on here, I've also got going on over here, and it's going to happen simultaneously. So you've got to be able to manage both things at the same time. Can you do it? Are you guys up for it? Yeah? Here's what you need. Let me give you one word. You need focus. You need focus. Right now, you guys, your minds are a little distracted because there are all these people watching you. You need to let them go. All right? And you need to focus in the present moment. If you can do that, you can make this happen right here and right now. All right? Can we do that? Yes. Yeah? Focus. All right, let's go. Jampao. Okay. What happened here? What happened to the sound? What happened to the sound? So let me tell you what happened. In some cases, we received a sound and we gave a breakfast. In other cases, we received a breakfast and we converted it into a sound and gave it. We had to keep it separate. So this also talks about aspects of separating, you know, your emotions from the things that you really need to get done. Focus and being able to manage multiple priorities. But that kind of gets the point across. I'm not going to play the whole game. We play up to 7 or 8 layers when we used to play this game. 7 to 8 layers. Imagine that. 7 to 8 different priorities and important things that you've got to keep in mind while you're playing this thing. And you've got to be in absolute focus mode to play this. Give them a round of applause, guys. They're probably wondering what's the reward that they were going to get. All this, what's the point of playing the U game, and what are some of the hidden embedded messages associated with this? So some of the things that I just talked about are ability to focus, ability to communicate the right things to the right person. It's also about communication, some of the core aspects of communication, which is, you know, give and receive communication. I've said something to you, but you didn't hear it. Now let me ask you guys a question. If I said something to you and you didn't hear it, or you didn't hear it, or you didn't respond to it, whose fault is it? Is it my fault or is it your fault? Both? How many people say both? Okay. How many people say it's the recipient's fault? Sunta ka mein, maybe something in the ears, not able to hear properly. Or somewhere else. Okay. Who says it's the environment? Okay, one person. Who says it's the giver or the sender of the information? It's the sender. It's always the sender. Why? Because it's the sender's responsibility to get the point across to who it is. And this is a really important facet with emails, right? I sent an email, but the guy didn't respond. Or let me give you another example. I sent an email, I hit send, right? But the person who received the email, who's supposed to receive the email, never received it. Whose fault is it? The sender, in this case? Yeah, because the device is not connected to the internet. Right? So you hit send and you sent it, but it's in your outbox. This is real stuff. I mean, this stuff happens all the time, right? So it's always the sender's responsibility to ensure that the recipient has received the message that the sender is trying to give. So this is just one example of the kind of lessons or learnings that we used to use back then. These were the founding and the building blocks of what we now call immersive learning. And if you were to be able to do that game effectively, you would be in something called immersive learning, because you'd be immersed in that moment. You wouldn't be able to think about anybody else. You know, there's a lot of pressure on those guys who are playing this right now, because there's like half the crowd watching them, right? But they had to step away from all of that, and none of you guys can tell me that you weren't thinking about all of that, right? Because if you weren't, then you'd be able to do effectively really, really well in that game, because you'd be here and now. Right here and right now, right? And that's the power of immersive learning. So I want to talk a little bit about the fundamentals of how we came across immersive learning from our journey of doing it. The very first thing that we found, which was important in creating this, was context. Now, a game like this has no context, right? You just get together and you play, and you just do you, and then you scream out some breakfast items and you laugh at it. So it has no context, but exactly like what Greg was talking about earlier, strong storylines are required to create an immersive environment, to create an immersive experience. And we realized that we needed strong storylines. So for that, we started working backwards and started looking at what could be some really, really powerful stories that we could come up with, which could drive a point across, which could be able to really create a believable environment for our audience. Something like global warming, or something like the world, all the air is going to become methanized. So some of you guys from last year played Evolve, know about that game. And what could happen if, how would you respond to those kinds of situations? So we said we need a context, and it's very similar to something like a movie. When you first go watch a movie, the 15, 20 minutes of that movie is spent in the director explaining to you the context and the environment of what's going on. This is the planet, this solar system has 2 suns and has 5 moons, and the gravitational pull is different. And everything that the director is trying to communicate to you have to believe, because that's the environment that is being created. That's the context. And in that context, you have the ability to create your own rules. And you have the ability to create exactly like what Greg was again talking about, which is the kind of game mechanics that can enable or disable different kinds of behaviors. So we wanted to make it, it's a very jargon-centric industry. So we said, make it, context doesn't sound cool enough, so we're going to make it contextual. And so we added a little suffix to that and made it contextual. And that's the first stage of creating an immersive environment, or immersive learning for that matter. The second thing that we realized was complex. We needed to have complexity in order to create an immersive experience. Why is that important? Because when a person is in a complex environment, the person is not thinking about anything else. The more complex the game there got, the less attached they were to what's going on outside of that circle, right? And the more complex and the more invested they become, the more focused they become. And the contextual environment allows you to do that. And with complexity comes 100% usage of your mental capacity. And that's really what we want to do in an immersive environment. We want to try and occupy 100% of the person's mind, so that they're not thinking about anything else during the time of the experience. And so we said, complex is a little boring, let's make it composite. So composite was the second function fundamental of immersive learning. Third is iterations. The more times you do it, the better you get at it. And so before we used to do these, so the way that we used to do learning was we used to do one activity, then we'd move to another activity, then we'd do another activity, and these all activities would be very different from one another. They'd be very disparate from one another. In trying to achieve an immersive experience, we realized that we wanted to create a somewhat tangible and similar environment from iteration to iteration, so that people can start to see progression of learning and of change. When people start to see progression in what they're doing, they start believing in the ability to apply a new skill. And for instance, if I see myself changing from being a non-collaborative player to then becoming collaborative player in the same environment, I'm able to now measure the delta, and I'm able to see that I made a change. And because of that change, I was able to not just influence my outcome, but an outcome of the entire group of people who were playing the game simultaneously. And iterations are incredibly important because they allow you to try, fail, and adjust. And that cycle continues time and again. So it's a really important part of learning. And for those of us who've played Evolve, once again, know that iterations is a critical part of the game. For those of us who've not played Evolve, there's another game that we're doing tomorrow, by the way, between 2 and 5, and anybody who's around, I welcome you guys to join in and play. This is again, a multiplayer game, which is kind of, you're becoming a superhero. So you lost your superpowers, and you're regaining those superpowers by playing this game, and it's a co-op game which you play tech-based, so tech and physical, so it's kind of like a blended sort of game. And then last but not least, this is my favorite by far, which is reflection. And we said that you've got to be able to reflect on what you do. And that has to be a critical part of learning, because that really completes the learning part of what you really wanted to do. And as a matter of fact, technology is taking away from what you in fact intended to do to begin with. So start with that purpose. So one of our organizations, clients that we were working with, wanted to align the leadership team together. They said they had a team of some 35 leaders, and they wanted these people to align with one another. And there was a lot of shifting ground, actually. The organization was going through restructuring and such. And so they said they wanted people to work together and stick around. And so we started thinking about this, and we created an environment wherein there's a tsunami coming, and the tsunami will hit, and after the tsunami hits, you can't really, Earth is not going to be a place where you can live. So here's the deal, you've got to move from Earth to Mars. And in moving from Earth to Mars, there's a spaceship, and there's only a certain number of seats, because there's only a certain amount of oxygen on this spaceship, and you can only choose maybe 15 or 20 people to take with you. So out of the 35 people, everybody gets a profession card, and then they get to choose who it is that goes and who it is that stays. So based on profession, so this is the very first level of the intervention, where through the professions alone, we start talking about what are the biases that we hold towards one person or one profession or another. And amazingly, people like the mojito maker never made it on the spaceship, or the hedge fund manager never made it to the spaceship, or the astronaut was the first person to go, the soldier was the first person to go. But people who had, who were like somebody who had an odd job, like a housekeeper or somebody, was not going. And it's amazing to talk about those kinds of biases that we hold against different people or different professions, and how that plays out in our day-to-day lives. So that was the first level of intervention. Then they got into the spaceship, and then it was time for them to embark. Now here's where we created the game mechanics. So the game mechanics were very, very simple. It was about, it was a WhatsApp group. We created a really large WhatsApp group, and we said this is a non-hibernation trip, so that means you've got to be active, and it'll take a year to make this transit. And in this year, your health level has to be above 75%. And we factored in 4 components of health: emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual. And we said every activity that you do will give you some sort of points, and these points will go into a dashboard which you're able to see on the screen. And how do you play? The way you play this game is through, let's say we're all in this WhatsApp group. Let's say that let's say that you want to do an activity. Any activity, like take a shower. Okay, that's a really bad example, but you'll know why in just a minute. But so you want to do an activity, and I wanted to join you, but so, bad example. Like I said, so I wanted to join running rock. No, you don't rock climb inside the spaceship. But let's say you wanted to go run, go for a run on the treadmill, and I wanted to join you. So you would, in the WhatsApp group, you would type run or running, and then I would give a thumbs up. Now, if I give a thumbs up to you while you were running, that would mean that I'm joining you on that endeavor, right? And any number of people who gave thumbs up to you were joining. But anybody else who came up with a new activity like swimming, and I gave a thumbs up to you under running, but the swimming came before that, I'm actually going swimming with that person. And the way that we assigned the points were, the more people that were doing a single activity, the more points you get. So it was for exponential points for working together and collaborating together. And through this, so we saw teams struggling and trying to figure out what was the algorithm and what was the, how do you win this thing? And people started experimenting with all kinds of different tools and ideas and, strategies. Finally, they figured it out that we had to do the same thing together. From that, we derived that people started communicating with one another. We derived that people started looking at what the other person wanted to do. And there were the 4 aspects of mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual were balanced in a way that if you ever got one thing of too much of one thing, then you'd have to balance it out, all 4 of them. And one quarter or another would have a higher requirement of one or another aspect of these 4 elements. But what I'm trying to say is that that through this engagement, we were able to create a contextual environment. We were able to create a composite environment by making it more, too many things going on simultaneously. We made it iterative so that people played it, tried, failed again, and it did multiple iterations of the game, so they didn't make the same mistakes that they did the first time. And then, of course, we allowed reflection opportunities after these kinds of interventions happen, which allows people to talk about it and say, how their feelings were hurt when they weren't on the ship, and how did they feel about that? How did they feel excluded, or how did they deal with that? So it's not just about feeling excluded or feeling disappointment. It's also about how did they deal with it. And fear of rejection is huge. The fear of rejection is the reason why a lot of people will have trouble, taking a step in shaking somebody new person's hand, because it's the one reason why people don't speak in public, or they don't say anything that's against the status quo. So all of these things come out, and then we're able to look at what are the things that are holding these individuals back from really unleashing or becoming better at what they could and what they could be doing. So that's a little bit of our journey, and today we design a lot more technology-based games, which are using technology but not losing sight of that purpose. So what's the point? What's my purpose here in talking to you guys about this? My purpose is that any game can be turned into an immersive game. It doesn't have to be a tech game. It doesn't have to be a game which is just or fun or anything. It can be turned into an immersive experience if you were to look at these four critical aspects. And if you were able to include this, we can actually enable learning through these games. I mean, imagine so many games out there that can allow for learning and for reflection through just the process of gameplay. There are some great games out there, and you guys are all working on great games. Many of the game developers, all they need to add is one critical element, which is the opportunity, or pause the game for 5 minutes. How does a typical gameplay happen? Like if you look at like Call of Duty, somebody's playing the game, play, and then they get shot, they die, and then restart, and then they're right back, right? They never actually get a chance to stop and think about how often have you guys ever what happened? Let me think about that. That never happens, right? In gameplay, it never happens because you want to get right back in the action. And the games are encouraging that all the more. What if there was a pause button, or what if there was the game that natively stopped and said reflect? Give you the opportunity to think about what you do. That can change the way that we learn, and it can really put milestones ahead of pillars that we built along the way that kind of help us now design games which are immersive in nature that also enable learning. So at this point, I'm kind of ready to have a conversation. So
participants who participated in the game-based learning intervention compared to 18%, because there's no improvement on the regular training. That was their benchmark, 80%, which was significantly over 600% more effective than a person who was not trained with the same kind of sales training. So there are some very real benchmarks that you can actually get, whether it's voluntary staff engagement, whether it's engagement in general, whether you talked about, Karthik, this idea of how much time they spent, how many times they effectively did that thing. All of those things are very real metrics that I think you can
Sure. You replay as in watching your replay?
No, like every
Right, so that's iteration.
Not just that,
Respawn.
just before respawning, you get 10-15 seconds.
Yeah, of seeing who shot you and stuff like that. So you're talking about Call of Duty. Most, yeah. Every time. Every time. Right.
Coming from the same perspective, I play Dota. So when
Sure.
you die, you actually get a certain time, a minimum
More of that. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? Okay. All right, so either it was really good or it was